The Supreme Court deals a sharp blow to President Obama, putting faith above Obamacare. This is Special Report. Good evening. I'm Shannon Bream in for Brett Baer. The nation's highest court has ruled that the government cannot force certain businesses to defy religious objections and provide contraceptives the business owners believe can trigger abortions. It is a landmark decision in terms of faith, corporate rights, and of course, an Obamacare law that continues to divide the nation and the courts. Earlier in the day, another victory for conservatives with a ruling against labor unions. We've got Fox team coverage of the rulings and the reaction. Britt Hume here in Washington on what they say about the justices sitting on the bench. Mike Tobin is in Winthrop Harbor, Illinois, with the woman at the heart of the anti-union lawsuit. But we begin with a look at what the contraception ruling says and why the justices ruled as they did.
We're thrilled with this decision.
Today, in a 5-4 opinion, the Supreme Court sided with the devoutly religious family owners of two for-profit corporations, holding that the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, or RFRA, protects them from forced compliance with a government edict the families say is in direct conflict with their most deeply held religious convictions. For more than a year and a half, the Green family, founders and owners of the Hobby Lobby craft store chain, has been fighting a government mandate stemming from the health care law, a federal regulation that would force them to provide their employees cost-free access to 20 forms of contraception, including 4 methods the Green family believes can trigger abortions, something they refuse to do. But that refusal could result in fines in the range of $475 million a year. Writing for the majority, Justice Samuel Alito said, quote, "We hold that the regulations that impose this obligation violate RFRA, which prohibits the federal government from taking any action that substantially burdens the exercise of religion, unless that action constitutes the least restrictive means of serving a compelling government interest." Adding later, quote, "HHS has not shown that it lacks other means of achieving its desired goal without imposing a substantial burden on the exercise of religion by the objecting parties in these cases." Responding to today's decision, Hobby Lobby co-founder Barbara Green said her family was overjoyed, adding, quote, "The court's decision is a victory, not just for our family business, but for all who seek to live out their faith."
The court issued a careful ruling, it issued a narrow ruling, and it squarely rebuked the administration's groundless position that Americans lose their religious freedom when they go out and open a family business.
Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg called the majority's view radical and decried the interpretation that the law, quote, "demands accommodation of a for-profit corporation's religious beliefs, no matter the impact that accommodation may have on third parties who do not share the corporation owner's religious faith. In these cases, thousands of women employed by Hobby Lobby and Conestoga." An assertion Alito directly rebutted, writing that there are other ways of making sure female employees retain full access to any FDA-approved method of birth control they choose without forcing devoutly religious business owners to foot the bill. White House reaction was as expected.
We disagree, and the constitutional lawyer in the Oval Office disagrees with that conclusion from the Supreme Court.
Both the White House and several Democratic members of Congress are vowing to take action in response to today's opinion. One of the first proposals comes from Democratic Senator Dick Durbin, who wants to require corporations that limit contraceptive choices to disclose that to all employees and applicants. Now to the union case. The court decided in another 5-4 split that thousands of home health care workers in Illinois cannot be required to pay union fees. Correspondent Mike Tobin is in suburban Chicago tonight with the woman who stood up to big labor.
Overjoyed was the reaction of Pam Harris when the Supreme Court ruled that she could not be forced to join a state employees union just because she receives state money.
Is this good yogurt?
For Harris, it means her home does not become a union shop while she cares for her son Josh, who suffers from a rare, severe, and incurable condition.
It means no third-party intrusion. It means that there's not going to be a union contract inserted between my son and I. There's not going to be union rules and regulations dictating how I can provide the care that Josh needs.
In the majority opinion, Justice Samuel Alito wrote, "No person in this country may be compelled to subsidize speech by a third party that he or she does not wish to support."
It's almost a complete win. It justifies, their position that they cannot be forced to pay compulsory fees to the SEIU as a condition of providing home care to their children.
The ruling was not a death blow to unions because it treats home health care providers like Harris as an exception, different than state employees. They serve the state Harris serves her disabled son.
I think it's a warning shot to unions that they went way too far by organizing families.
The American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees responded today's ruling did not hand anti-worker extremists the victory they'd been hoping for because the court did not revoke collective bargaining rights for public service workers or care providers. It did not eliminate existing contracts.
Home care workers have been standing together with their consumers and their allies in the disability rights movement for the past 30 years, and one Supreme Court decision is not going to change that.
Although home care providers are the exception, their numbers are still substantial between care for the elderly and the disabled. The SEIU claims there are 25,000 of them in the state. In the opinion, the Supreme Court noted that they had been generating $3.6 million in annual dues just in Illinois. Shannon?
Mike, thank you very much. Let's take a look now what these decisions say about this Supreme Court. Senior political analyst Britt Hume is here with some thoughts. Good evening, Britt.
Hi, Shannon. Today's Supreme Court decisions reflect the state of American politics. A narrowly but deeply divided court produced two narrowly tailored rulings that nonetheless provoked extravagant reactions from both sides. Consider the Hobby Lobby case. The company's supporters cheered wildly. And from Justice Ginsburg's dissent, you might have thought that the court had carved out a vast exemption from Obamacare's requirements for any company claiming a religious objection. She described the ruling as one of, quote, startling breadth. But the court ruled that only closely held companies, such as family-owned Hobby Lobby, whose owner's religion is deeply embedded in the company's culture, cannot be forced to provide certain forms of birth control. Mind you, Hobby Lobby had no objection to the 16 types of birth control used by most women, only resisting a few which the company said amounted to abortion. The root of all this, of course, is the Obamacare law itself, which passed Congress by the narrowest possible margin on a purely partisan vote and has been the object of intense resistance ever since. Small wonder, then, that its individual mandate was barely upheld earlier by a closely divided Supreme Court. And equally small wonder that it continues to produce narrow rulings by narrow margins. Divided court, divided Congress, divided country. Shannon?
That about sums it up. We'll talk about it with the panel. Thanks, Brett.
You bet.
Well, stocks were mixed today. The Dow lost 25, the S&P 500 dropped 0.75, NASDAQ gained 10. Up next, what will Israel do about the killing of 3 Israeli teenagers after their abduction in the West Bank? First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates are covering tonight. Fox 11 in Los Angeles with the Border Patrol flying hundreds of Central American illegal immigrants from Texas to California for processing. 2 flights a day every 3 days for an undetermined period of time. Fox 44 is covering the return of the kissing congressman. Republican Vance McAllister has decided he will run for re-election after all. The married father of 5 had said he would not after he was caught on video lip-locking a married female aide. And this is a live look at Detroit from Fox 2. The big story there tonight, another gigantic recall for GM over ignition switches, 7.5 million more cars. Plus details on how GM will handle what could be billions of dollars in damage claims over those switches. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We'll be right back.